Get on the bandwagon. We're farming dragon. Hey everyone, Bront CatHerder here, talking Raid Shadow Legends. We're having fun here in the Dragon. I am on hard stage 10, and this is my team. We will certainly go over this a little bit later. You can see this run went about 1:07. I'm running on 60 frames per second, so the unlimited here will run a lot faster. As you can see, I've run this at 41 seconds. I believe it was this team or something close to this team. I have made a couple changes to this team as I've gone, but this is generally the one I've used to farm hard 10. So I'm going to show off this team, but I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about other ways you can farm Dragon, both on the normal and the hard stages, what champions you need, what champions you can choose to replace, and we'll go over a few different options here and have some fun talking about it. So let's go. Alrighty, before we get into the presets, we're going to delve into the builds and the theory behind the various builds. I will try to talk about some alternate champions here. I'll also do it during the setup. But right here, we've got my Prince Kymar. This is my speed Kymar. You'll notice that he is a very fast 296. He is the fastest one on this team, and that is in order to make sure that on the second round, he does his reset skill and does it quickly so that everyone then can do everything they need to do. I needed to speed him up because my Mithrala is in my Fire Knight team, and she is very fast as well, so this was actually a change to get the speed a bit faster. As you can see here, the speed, very high. We definitely need over 250 speed if we are doing the hard Dragon 10. If you're going down to the hard lower levels or normal, you can reduce that speed by quite a bit and still be the fastest without too much of a problem. It does not have to be Kymar. Yumiko will work just as well on this team with those same speeds. If you don't have either of those, Renegade, who is a Void Rare, one of the easier ones to generally get for the reset champions, she only has a 2-turn reset, which means that she actually can be the slowest on your team. So she doesn't take a turn on the first run, and then the second run, everybody takes 1 turn, she resets, and then everybody's cooldowns are back in business. Got a couple different options there, and fortunately Renegade is the budget option for that, and Renegade would work just fine in this team. Would slow it down a little bit, because you have the extra turn on the second wave, and that's really the only reason it slows it down. But again, not too bad, easy to deal with, so we're not really missing out on much if you have to use a Renegade. All right, for my wave clear, I am using a Seer. She is in Savage and crit damage. You really do want her in something with the Ignore defense, so Savage, Instinct, or Lethal are your best 3 sets. The offset gear could be Cruel, just as well it could be crit damage. The idea is to get her to combined ignore enough damage as well as have a high enough crit damage to be able to one-shot the waves with all the buffs that you're bringing. The better she is built, the less buffs you need to bring. But so if you're struggling to kill, you can certainly change up the teams a little bit, add blood shield accessories, use shield set, use the sets that use block debuffs. There's a couple different options you can do to add more buffs or otherwise increase the effectiveness of your Seer. The specific stats aren't super important other than you want super high crit damage. If you cannot get her into Savage or the like, you're going to need more crit damage than I have right there. Flawless Execution is a great mastery for her to give her the bonus. If you could certainly try Helm Smasher or War Master. And in fact, War Master is better overall if you have enough damage without using Flawless Execution, because you get the extra War Master procs on top of maximum damage against bosses. So when she does hit the boss, it does some extra damage. Alternates to Seer, well, you could certainly build a Poison Explosion variation of this team. Now, several champs might change out if you did that. You can do that with a Zavia, you can do that with an Elenarl, you could even do that with Teos. There's a couple different options for building explosion teams or other wave clears. Taurus will work as well because he hits hard enough with his area effect with the buffs, so he'll actually work very similarly to Seer, but he should work as well. There's a couple different options you can use for the wave clear. And if you don't have a one-shot wave clear, then you can still build a very similar team to this with a nuker here instead that will take their time dragging down the waves, but they'll still be able to do it. It'll just take longer. All right, so here we have my Mithrala. Mithrala is not the same build I showed off in my Fat Bront build. However, this is still compatible with the Fat Bront build. She's a little bit slower, but she has increased crit rate and increased crit damage, so it actually drops the time in the Fat Bront just a little bit. It also helps here against the dragon by adding just a little bit of extra damage. The important shift here, and the reason I rebuilt her for this team, is in Bolster, this adds enough extra durability to all of the champs that I need to survive to make sure that the dragon doesn't kill one of them too early. And in Mithrala's case, it gives her some regen to make her stick around a little bit harder as well. Honestly, Bolster is not a bad option for the Fat Bront for the Fire Knight team, so not a bad change there as well. But here's the build. If she is below 250 speed, that is just fine. I will talk about the preset change you will need to make for that in the when we take a look at the presets. And finally, we have Stultus. This Stultus I built a long time ago for Arena, and I used him in Arena, built pretty much like this for quite a long time. I stopped using him in Arena when I got a couple different champions I decided I preferred to use. I never pulled the gear off because his gear was good, but I'd earned better gear by the time I was using different champions. So for the most part, this build has been what he was just kind of laying around in. And this works for this run. He doesn't take a turn in the way I've got it set up until the dragon, and then he's taking one turn, and it's not a big deal if he's taking more. You could speed him up a bit, but even speeding him up to 200 speed is not going to change how often he goes too often, other than he might get one extra turn during the course of it. Not the worst thing in the world if you do that, but it is not required. The 150 speed is really the minimum of where I'd probably aim for him, though, because you want him to take a few turns just in case. Now, the reason we use Stultus here is because Stultus has a passive ability. Here, let's go highlight that, where he will reflect weaken, decrease defense, and poisons back into the attacker. And this is important because he does not need accuracy to reflect this back on the attacker. The dragon, when the dragon spits out his poisons, 4 of those poisons get immediately thrown back to the dragon, making him very easy to build for this. And on top of that, he doesn't need to be the resistance to not get poisoned. He doesn't get hit with the instant activate for poisons, which can certainly wear down his health really quickly. And he doesn't even need to take a turn to do it, which makes him a lot better than other champions or other alternatives for this. However, there are other champions you can use. You can use a champion like a Helior, who has a reflect back on the attacker. You can use a Jing Wong is actually very good for this. Jing Wong's A1 reflects things back on the attacker. It's not a reflect, so you don't get the full duration, and again, they're not reflected, so you need to actually land for the accuracy to get them in both of those champs. There are other options for this as well. Again, you can use champions like a Teo or Poison Explosion to basically blow down the boss. That's harder when you get to stage 10 hard, just because the dragon is so fast. So any of those builds are different enough that I'm not going to cover too many of them. But for the most part, Stultus and Mithrala mostly solo the boss with all the poisons themselves. So how does it work? Well, let's go take a look at the presets. Before I go to the presets, one thing to be aware of with Stultus, I used to have him in Helm Smasher. I did not keep him in Helm Smasher. I moved him on to War Master. War Master gives him more damage against the boss more reliably than Helm Smasher, just because ignoring defense isn't helping as much. The other thing I found is this Life Drinker helps keep him alive for one extra round, and that one extra round can make the difference between whether this thing succeeds 100% or fails. So these are the masteries I have him in. The important ones, however, are Life Drinker and War Master. Everything else is very optional depending on what other content you're using him in. All right, so we're in the presets for this hard dragon build. Again, this will work against the normal dragon as well, pretty much as constructed. There are other strategies you can use as well, but this will work just fine. Stultus here is set up to pretty much do nothing other than we want his dragon heart to be his highest priority because that puts an increased defense on him. We don't really care too much about the debuffs on this. He's not going to have enough accuracy to land them anyway. But the increased defense means that he's going to be that much tankier for the dragon when the dragon's pounding on him. So we want him to stay alive as long as possible, because as long as he is alive, the dragon can reflect poisons back on himself. Prince Kymar's setup, pretty simple. We're going to just stick with the A1 on round 1. On round 2, we'll do the Seal of Magic first, because he's going first with his 296 speed. Then he can just A1. We don't really care about the Abyssal Gaze, which is his sleep and strip buffs, because we just don't. You should be killing everything well beforehand, and the sleep just doesn't control anybody in this type of format, so don't bother with it. This gives you a chance to give out poisons. Might as well do it. Round 3, same thing here. We'll be using his A1. Again, chance for poisons, you have to crit, so it's not likely with that crit rate. Seal of Magic, if he gets it off, never hurts. All right, for Mithrala, round 1 and round 2 are going to be identical. We will use the Sigil of Toxic Glory and then shut it off. This is her Hex, which allows for some extra damage from Seer when you hit the nuke, as well as the increased defense and increased attack buffs that Seer can then eat. On round 3, we actually turn the Sigil of Toxic Glory off, and this is where, as I mentioned, there could be differences depending on if you are a higher speed than 250 or lower speed. If you are higher than 250 speed, and this includes any speed buff you may have by the lead, you want to lead off with the A1 first to get some extra poisons out, whereas on the A, otherwise you want to use this as the first thing you do, because you'll be going after the dragon. You want to cleanse all the poisons off any other champions you get. The important part, however, is the strengthen and the shield, giving Mithrala and Stultus much more survivability for this next turn. And then we just keep going where she'll get 2 poisons off every time with her A1, and we'll get her shields and cleanses occasionally. Seer is pretty simple. We turn off her clan banner. We use her karma burn. If she doesn't kill everybody on the wave, we just want her to A1 until the next round. Same thing with her A2 here, or with round 2 here. We want the karma burn. In fact, I'll put that as the opener. At this point in time, I don't mind if we leave it on, because if it gets around to her using it a second time, I want her to nuke his bound as much as possible. It shouldn't. She should be one-shotting the waves most of the time. During the dragon, we are going to only use the A1. We don't need the clan banner, and the karma burn will rip off too many buffs that could be keeping us alive. So this is actually dangerous to use against the boss. Honestly, our hope is that she dies. We're not looking for her to stay alive. Her dying will speed up the run. That's actually one of the disadvantages of Mithrala in Shield or in Bolster set, is that Seer might otherwise have died before she ever took a turn, but with Mithrala, she'll survive for a turn or two, and that can slow down your run. Seems counterintuitive, but that's kind of how speed runs work. You want people to do their job, and then you want them to get out of the way, which usually means dying. Okay, Lydia by default will use her A1 or A2, then use her A3, and then her A1. That's fine. Don't really care. Round 2, she's also going to be reset. Notice we're turning off the nullification because we absolutely want that for round 3. Nullification is what puts up the block buffs, and the poison sensitivity can be helpful as well, because we're going to be putting a bunch of poisons up on the boss. So again, we lead as the main thing to land for nullification. If she does her Siren's Wail, the decreased defense and weaken doesn't hurt, but most of our damage is coming from poisons. So the only things that are really useful from this are the strengthen and increased speed. You could even shut this off if you really wanted to, but the strengthen and increased speed might give you enough of an extra boost to do a little bit more damage. So it's worth having, in my opinion. All right, we're going to step back to Seer for a second on for round 2, which is important if you are using a Renegade. For round 2, instead of setting it up like this, you would have this setup. The clan banner would be the first thing that she would do. Then, when Renegade resets, which drops this by 2 turns, she'll have already taken a turn, that's the 3rd turn. She'll get around to the next turn, the 4th turn. So she will take 1 turn, use Clan Banner, take a 2nd turn, use Karma Burn. And she's giving herself some extra buffs, which actually means a Renegade team, you can use a few less buffs, but it will be a little slower because you need her to take a 2nd turn. So that is how you set up a Renegade version of this team, rather than a Kaimar or Yumiko version of this team. Obviously, with Renegade, you're going to want to have her reset turned off on round 1 and then turned on round 2. And you ideally want her the slowest person on your team, so everybody on your team takes a turn, Renegade resets, and then everyone does the ability that they're supposed to do on their turn the 2nd time around. Finally, just talking auras here. Stultus has a 30% increased defense in all battles. Mithrala has some accuracy increases. If you need the accuracy, you can certainly use Mithrala's lead. Stultus's lead gives me more defense for Stultus and the rest of these champions to be just a little tankier. So let's dive into the dungeon and watch this go. So there we are, getting some buffs out and getting the debuffs on, and there goes Seer. Timer resets, and we do the same thing again. All right, so we're here on the boss, and we're getting some poisons out. We got the nullification out, landed the block buffs, and look at all these poisons Stultus just threw on the dragon. That's wonderful. And Seer's decided to take a bunch of extra turns, so this round is going to be a little bit slower. Actually kind of a shame she didn't die out of that, but oh well. All right, but Seer's dead, not a big deal. Kaimar and Lydia should be gone next time the dragon actually does anything. But we've got a mostly full bar of debuffs, and dragon is mostly dead. And look at all those poisons we got in there. So it's just a matter of time at this point in time before the dragon dies. Get a few extra poisons up there. Not a big deal. There you go. Minute 3. And I'm not running on unlimited again. I am running on 60 frames a second. So unlimited could shave as much as 10 seconds off this. So we're talking a 50 to 70 second time run. Pretty fast for Dragon. Obviously, Dragon's one of the easier dungeons, so it's not too hard to build some of these teams, and there's a lot of variation. But hopefully you learned a little bit about how to build these teams and different options that you could do to build them. So appreciate your time. Hopefully this was educational and you had a little bit of fun learning something. Until next time, I'm Bront CatHerder. Much love.